Hello everyone, and welcome to our first topic of Psych 4421, which is attachment styles. The way these video lectures are going to go is they are brief overviews of the topic at hand, and the materials that you'll be assigned for your annotation assignments are going to go much more in depth. And then what you're going to do is you're going to use that literature review assignment to really help you go beyond even those annotations to help you really think critically about the topic at hand. So I want to get started on attachment styles. To kind of briefly preface this topic a little bit, we often talk about attachment styles and we think about and we stop at infancy. We typically talk about what Mary Ainsworth talks about as a strained situation, where we say a strained situation occurs, the caregiver's sensitivity to the child impacts early bonding that the child has with their primary caregiver. But I want you guys to know throughout this lecture and through this class that attachment is not just a childhood phenomenon. It's actually a developmental system that continues to impact and shape who we are as individuals. So for instance, I work with, and I've kind of shared this, I work with students who experience a lot of trauma throughout their life. The trauma that they continue to experience throughout their life, in addition to the childhood trauma, impacts not only how they view romantic connections, how they view friendships and relationships, but it also shapes how individuals and themselves emotionally regulate. That's the biggest one that I see. So overall, attachment not only shapes, how we are with our primary caregivers, but it impacts how we regulate our emotions, form relationships, and interrupt safely when there's a threat that is posed to us through the lifespan. So kind of taken together, attachment is best understood not only as just a fixed trait, but it's actually a set of interworking models and expectations that we have about ourselves, others, and the relationships that we have. So let's get into a brief overview of the 4 types of attachment styles. So I want to go ahead and kickstart off our lecture today talking about the 4 different core attachment styles that individuals typically fall in. I do want to preface that on Canvas, you do have links to 4 different videos. Those videos each outline the different type of attachment style more in detail, giving you kind of what it may look like within romantic connections, what it may look like within the childhood, and how it's developed through Mary Ainsworth framework, because this is her framework. First, let's start off with secure attachment. This is kind of the golden standard of what we want. We want a secure attachment within the children that we work with, our children if we're parents, but also this is something that we are typically striving for as humans. The belief that I want to go over with this is that this person feels very solid in themselves. There's an increased amount of self-worth, self-esteem, and they're feeling like that they are worthy of care, that they deserve care, and that others are generally reliable to provide that care when asked. So if we think about that, we develop a secure attachment when our primary caregiver is responsive to our needs growing up. That teaches us very early on that, hey, other people will also potentially provide that. So it generalizes. The outcome of a secure attachment is that child, that adult, that adolescent is actually going to be emotionally open. So I've been very open about kind of parts of the line of work that I work in as a clinical provider, and I work with students with trauma experiences. A lot of my students struggle to be emotionally open because there have been individuals in their life that have not been trustworthy. So therefore, it is generalized to kind of the mass population of adults they work with. So they would not fall in that secure attachment style. However, those with the secure attachment style would be emotionally open. They also have a sense of resiliency. Because they view obstacles as small challenges and they're temporary, therefore they see the light at the end of the tunnel. And overall, within relationships, when there is a relationship rift, whether it's a friendship, emotional, or relational connection, or romantic connection, family relationship, sibling relationship, they feel that they are able to repair that because they have done that before. So we're really striving for the secure attachment. This is most likely what we consider the golden standard of what we want to achieve. Now let's move over to avoidant, or something we might see as dismissive attachment. So a little bit of the beliefs of this, a dismissive individual is most likely feeling like if they rely on others, that means it's pretty much pointless. That if we rely on others, it's unsafe. This comes from the stem that no one has showed up for them. that individuals have trouble feeling that other people are reliable. This is because when they were asking for their needs as a child, they were not getting met. Therefore, they feel that no one's safe. It is then generalized. So a little bit of the outcomes of this is that the emotions then become suppressed. They're not likely to discuss their emotions. They're not likely to talk about them. And they have a lot of discomfort with dependence, meaning relationships, although they want them, they feel very scary because how can someone be that reliable to be with? Or how can someone love me that much? And so they rely a lot on themselves. This would be our overly independent individual. They rely on themselves. Now we have anxious and preoccupied. This is the individual who's typically, if we're to think it in relationship standpoints, this is a person who really wants a relationship, but they're really nervous to kind of create that connection. The belief for this is that I must amplify any distress I have to receive any care. So these are our kiddos, these are our adolescents in my kind of realm, where the louder they are, the more in my realm, the more violent they get with each other, the more likely someone is going to take the time to see what my needs are. This is the child who cried and felt like they had to cry loud enough in order for their caregiver to really understand that a need is there. So they believe, well, I have to get very loud in order to get the care and attention I need for my needs. So the outcomes of this is that there's a lot of intense emotions. So they experience the emotions, but they're on a high for that individual. And when working with someone who's relatively anxious, they feel the immense power of what those emotions are. They may feel sometimes overwhelmed with those emotions, but they feel those emotions very heavily from that person. The big core with this is that there's the fear of abandonment, the fear that people aren't going to love them, that people aren't going to like them, and that people aren't going to understand them. And so with this, through the anxiousness, if we think about anxiety as a clinical diagnosis, a big part of that symptomology is rumination. And so rumination is that excess amount of thoughts that just kind of linger, and they stay on your mind. Some of us may call it spiraling, but the outcomes is they have increased rumination, other words as spiraling, about relationships and about how other people will show up for them. And then we have disorganized attachment. This is very much an attachment style that is very much in a whirlwind. The belief is that care and threat are intertwined. So if someone wants to help me, that's also perceived as a threat at the same time. It's almost as if nothing is safe and there's challenges to differentiate what is love and care and what is I'm out to get you. So the outcomes of this is that it's really hard for them to integrate their emotions and behavior, and for those to kind of pan out in a healthy manner. There's also an increased risk for later psychopathology as well with a disorganized attachment style. So we may see this linger with certain diagnoses. So I want you to take a pause and I want you to kind of self-reflect for yourself. I want you to read through these attachment styles. I want you to watch those videos on Canvas, and I want you to ask yourself, what attachment style do I have? All right, we're already going through the bulk of attachment styles. I hope you're hanging on. I hope you're able to follow. As always, if you have any questions, please reach out to me via email. But I want to get into about how attachment style impacts us through the developmental lifespan. Because although our attachment style is pretty much established in our early childhood, it also impacts us as we go and we move through the different life obstacles and relationships that we develop through our lifespan from adolescence all until late adulthood. So I want to start with childhood. Attachment is influenced at this period of time. This is where we start to learn what we can emotionally regulate. I associate this with what I consider our window of tolerance. So if we think of a window, like the window behind me, if it's open all the way, we're going to be able to have a lot of breeze come through. That means we could tolerate a lot at once. When the window is closed or it's cracked open, not much wind or air is able to pass through. That's a small window of tolerance. So we as a child, we get to start to identify where that window of tolerance is. Can we take on a lot, or do we have a small window of what we can tolerate? Also, our peer relationships and our social competence really play out. Because our peer relationships in our childhood, especially those early relationships with peers, but also those relationships with family and other individuals that are in our life, it really helps us build how well we're able to socialize with other people, which then in return will impact our attachment style. And then this is a big area of exploration and learning. This is where we're kind of figuring things out. This is the testing phase of attachment style as well. This is where things start to get solidified when it comes to our attachment style, but we're really observing and learning about the world at hand. So after our childhood, we go into adolescence. This is when our attachment is starting to reorganize a little bit because our priority and focus within life in our adolescence changes from our primary caregivers to our peers and to our romantic relationships. So if we think of ourselves at 13 years old per se to maybe 18 years old, that adolescent phase, we're more likely to want to be with our friends and want to establish those romantic connections. So we're really shifting away from our parents to these outside sources from our family. We're really increasing that cognitive capacity about relationships, and we're having a lot of reflection on relationships as a whole. We're starting to identify what we like, what we don't like, what kind of friends we want to hang out with. We also are trying to figure out what we want to be in, and we also want to be cool. So how do we navigate all those things? However, if we have a child with an insecure attachment style, in our adolescence, it may start to manifest in risk-taking. So that would be sexual behaviors, that would be drug usage, that would be excess ditching school, getting into fights. A lot of my students are experiencing that I work with an insecure attachment style because their caregivers were not actively present all the time. So they engage in a lot of risk-taking behaviors with their peers and with their friends and with their partners as well. And then sometimes they may experience, if insecure attachment style is manifested within adolescence, very intensive relationship dependency or conflict. So you may see this as an early relationship with a lot of fighting, with a lot of yelling, a lot of disagreements. Sometimes abuse may occur. Also, these relationships can be overly dependent. There's an over-reliance on that person. For instance, if we're thinking adolescents, they may always text me, I need to have their location. Why are they talking to him, her? Why are they following that person? So it really can come off and show up in that regard in adolescence. Those are really pivotal years for attachment style as well. And then we have adulthood. Our attachment is really focused in these romantic relationships that we have in our adulthood. This is where we're establishing those solid romantic relationships. By this time, we have a good idea of maybe what we're looking for in these romantic relationships. And it's really linked to a lot of functioning that we may or may not have in these relationships. How healthy is that relationship? And in addition, our attachment style may manifest into some mental health outcomes. Is that increased anxiety, depression? Are we starting to acknowledge that the trauma has maybe some links with some borderline personality disorder? So these are some things that will start to kind of show its colors in this adulthood stage. And then later adulthood. We often forget about later adulthood when it comes to attachment. The reasons is a very different type of kind of lifespan that you're in. But attachment deeply matters during this time. Because during our later adulthood, we're typically very much into our careers, if not retiring. If we've had kids, we are empty nesters. If you're in a job, you're retiring. So there's all these different key components that are very much changing within this time. And there's a lot of coping with loss, illness, and dependency. Attachment style is going to greatly reflect how we are coping with those different factors, how resilient we are when it comes to devastations that later adulthood comes with. If we're to kind of compare and contrast secure versus avoidant, a secure attachment is more likely to be adjusted to caregiving roles and bereavement. And when I say caregiving roles, this means in later adulthood, we may have to take care of our parents, or we are stepping into that caregiving role in a different capacity. And then bereavement. Maybe we are losing those people we're caring for. Maybe we're experiencing immense loss in our family system and dynamic. So if we have a secure attachment, we're more likely to a better adjustment in that stage of our life. Versus if we compare it with avoidant attachment, there's very much more increased isolation. There's a lot more increased anxiety coping skills. There's a lot more erraticness that we may see. But there's definitely a challenge for that resiliency and to move past these obstacles. So even though we don't talk about it very much, our attachment style from childhood greatly impacts us throughout the entire lifespan. So this is a heavy-hitting question I get every single time I talk about attachment style is, does it change with the older I get? Or in other words, does attachment change across the lifespan? And the answer to that, according to research, is that attachment does have moderate stability throughout the lifespan. So we're more likely to have secure or insecure traits if we had that in early childhood development. However, life is inevitable. There is marriage, there is divorce, there are kids, there are a series of different unexpected life trajectories that can cause change to attachment styles, but pretty much if we're thinking about attachment styles, they're not drastically shifting. There may be small shifts that really kind of change how we respond, but overall attachment changes are not overall uniform. So what I mean by attachment changes are not uniform, it's saying person A and person B can both go through a divorce. It doesn't mean they're going to show the symptomology of their attachment style in the same way. So just something I want you guys to think about as you read through the depth of material for this week's assignments. But now let's go into kind of 3 different things that could potentially change our attachment style. The first one is relationship experiences, whether they're healthy, unhealthy, abusive, not abusive, what that kind of connection was like. Those can deeply change or not change our attachment style. Also, therapy and corrective emotion experiences. So therapy is a big piece into what can change attachment style for generally the positive. When I talk about corrective emotional experiences, a corrective emotional experience is that almost we're rewriting the past of what the past says about something. For instance, maybe it's how someone responds to something. It's reworking what we think is going to happen with something that's really healthy. So through therapy, we're able to get these corrective emotional experiences, but we're able to have those throughout our adulthood as well, and in our adolescence and throughout life. And then also major life transitions. This is loss, this is death, whether it's loss of a job, loss of a key figure in your life. This could be moving, this could be marriage, this could be divorce. These big major life transitions do impact potentially our attachment. But overall, the key thing I want you to kind of take note of is attachment is moderately stable, meaning it's fairly consistent with adjustments throughout your life. So if we're thinking clinically and societally, this is kind of how we may be able to generalize the conversation about attachment style and how it impacts individuals. Overall, attachment does shape how individuals seek help, whether they seek help, whether they don't seek help, and who they seek help from. These are really key parts that are established through our attachment that impact us in later adulthood. It also impacts how we respond to authority and institutions. So whether our attachment style is secure or not, we are either going to trust or not trust that individual or institution. For instance, a lot of my students, they have mistrust of school districts. They do not trust staff, they do not trust security, they do not trust teachers, and the list goes on and on. So it's about providing, in my role as a therapist, is those corrective emotional experiences, those reshapings, so they respond differently and healthier to what we may consider authority as the school district may have. Then it may impact whether we have safety and security in our romantic connections, in our systems. If we think about our family system, our relationship system that we create, it's heavily based on the attachment. We function and we respond in those symptoms based on what we think is true, what we've generalized, and what we've learned through our attachment and through our childhood experiences. And then overall attachment shapes how individuals parent and guide the future generation. A secure attachment individual is going to parent very differently than a disorganized, insecure attachment individual. So our attachment style does shape how we eventually parent. So that's a whole other different complex topic as well. But attachment does impact those aspects as well. And as we kind of close out today, also in therapy, attachment styles do influence therapy. And I always have to put a little touch of this in there because I am a psychotherapist, and this is definitely my realm. And this is where I see the differentiation of attachment styles daily within my therapeutic office and space. But in therapy, attachment style definitely impacts the likelihood someone is willing or not willing to form a therapeutic alliance with that provider. Whether they're willing or not willing to work on their goals, their progress, or even disclose truthfully within the therapeutic setting. So overall, attachment style impacts kind of this area in life. It also impacts how rupture and repair kind of occur. So for instance, I experience a lot of rupture when I have to make child abuse reports on children and families. And I learn a lot about one's attachment style based on how we're able to repair that therapeutic connection post CPS report. And so is that child, is that adolescent, is that adult able to healthily communicate? What are the values and beliefs that are coming up as they communicate? Is it, well, she's not going to listen? Or is it that I don't believe her? What are those belief systems coming up? But ultimately, that attachment style from insecure to secure are going to help influence what that repair is going to be like. And lastly, resistance and dependency. Is our client going to be overly attached to the therapeutic services that are provided, or is there going to be complete resistance where they no-show, where they don't show up, or they sit there and they don't have much to say? So all of these different aspects are very much impacted by attachment style. And I know you're definitely going to learn so much more throughout this week of material. I please encourage you to get started on your annotations early. If you do have any questions, concerns about the discussions, about today's lecture, or any of the additional materials posted on Canvas, please feel free to let me know. And I look forward to the next time we will meet for our lecture in the next week. All right, have a good week, and I'll talk to you guys soon.